my friends over at Ynab, You Need a Budget, they're not really my friends. I like to pretend they are, but they've got some really great tutorials and workshops for beginners. So I highly suggest checking out their site, youneedabudget.com, to learn more. We'll put a link in the description too. This episode's not meant to replace their getting started guides, but maybe give you some extra special tips from me and point you to theirs. So, what I actually do want to share is what I wish I would have known when I started, or what I found friends hadn't learned yet when I checked in with them after introducing them to YNAB to see how their journey is going. So, here's my top 5 tips for beginners of YNAB. You need a budget. You never budgeted like this before, if you're not familiar. Welcome to the FIFE Movement. I'm your host, Amanda Neely. This is the only movement that helps our generation create our unique, feminine, and entrepreneurial path to financial independence. Please be sure to subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that bell for future videos. Now, my number one top tip for beginners of YNAB, the most important thing you can do is get started. They offer a free trial. If you use the link in the description of the video, you can also get a second month free when you sign up. Of course, I get a month free too if you use that link, but sign up right away. Block out an hour to get started within the next day or two. There's no cost up front. Maybe even sign up for one of YNAB's workshops and get your YNAB set up while you're participating in that workshop. Really great way to get started, and pretty quick. You don't need to like set aside a whole day to start using YNAB. You can do it an hour here, 15 minutes there, that kind of thing. Now, the second most important thing after you've actually set up your account is to go in and customize what they call categories. But don't get too much into the weeds here. Now, if you missed the last video, I want you to go back and watch that, because there is some work to do outside of YNAB to know your priorities once you get into YNAB, and you can start shifting things around so that they align better with your unique priorities. Then, do your best. Don't get too much into the weeds, because you're likely going to play around with these more and more over time. Now, my categories have changed a lot since I started using YNAB, but many of them have stayed the same. What I want to show you before we go on to tip number 3 is what my categories look like today. So let me share my screen. Okay. I don't want you to get distracted by the numbers, so just check out the categories here. You'll notice that I have a giving category, and that comes first, and then savings goals, monthly bills, everyday expenses, short-term funds, and then credit card payments. I pay off my credit cards every month, so I'm not typically worried about those. It's at the bottom. And this is what's important to me. I want to make sure that I'm giving first and foremost from everything that I receive. And then, as you know, I'm a big believer that a portion of all I earn is mine to keep. So it goes into my savings goals for those longer term things. Monthly bills, that's your mortgage, electric, that kind of thing. Everyday expenses, groceries, restaurants, all that kind of thing. Short-term funds are things that happen more on an annual basis, like birthdays, holidays, that kind of thing. And then credit card payments is just the holder for the credit cards to make sure that they're getting paid off on schedule. And then within each of these category groups, I have categories like I keep my tithing separate from my charitable. Under savings goals, property taxes, home insurance, I do those outside of escrow, so they go into savings. If you're familiar with the whole idea of becoming your own banker or bank on yourself, I've got some honest banking in there, being a good banker to myself. And then sort of medium-term spending fund for me, that includes things like glasses, a new car, things that happen less often than once a year, but more like 3 to 10 years, something like that. Then monthly bills, we kind of talked about before. Those are, the mortgage, electric, those kind of things. And then everyday expenses, I do some things with my mom, groceries, etc. You can see these are very much customized for me. So that's what I wanted to share for the categories. And what you can do, let's say my monthly bills, I wanted to actually prioritize these. I could say water is more important than cable. You can just drag and drop, right, to recategorize them. Or I'm going to move it back down there. Or if I decided these short term funds I want up here, I can just drag and drop really easy when you're using the desktop version. Which actually reminds me of my next tip. When you're working on getting started, I highly recommend getting started within a web browser rather than using your phone for that initial setup. So, because when you're in a web browser, so what I'm actually going to do here, okay. So here you can see this is when you first start YNAB, what you'll see. And of course, you can use the arrows here to minimize them and then drag and drop, right? Click to double click or one click to edit, hide, delete, whatever. And you do that mostly with your mouse. But and then you can add an account. I'm going to do an unlinked. Let's call this checking one just for fun. And let's pretend it's $1,000. So once you've done that and you've got all your accounts here, when you're here, you can add things. And what I like to do, let's say I'm adding a transaction. Let's say I bought groceries. So you can type in and then hit tab rather than having to click, can say I spent $100 and then you can just click save and it'll add it and or you can hit enter to save it and it'll add another row without you having to click anything. But then you have to click cancel. And then when I'm on my budget and I'm looking to give every dollar a job, I can click on the first one, put in the amount, go down, right? Just use the down arrow, especially if I have all these open, right? I can go through and put everything in this way just by using the keyboard with arrows, which I found is really fast. And then also, let's say I wanted to add some things up. So groceries, I've got that 100, but I know I also need another 100 for next week, right? I can just use my keyboard to do plus 100. And that's really helpful if you're working with not even numbers, right? So I like that I can just go up and down this way. And then when I'm adding transactions, I can just hit enter and it goes on to the next one. So that's why I love the in browser when you're doing the initial setup. The app is super helpful when you're on the go and you're trying to figure out, what you want to do next and that kind of thing. And there's still a few things you have to use a mouse for, but I highly recommend trying the mobile app, seeing what you can do just really quickly by using your keyboard and arrows and stuff like that. Okay, so that was tip 3, I think, if you're keeping track, for using the browser. Another thing that's great is that you can create multiple budgets. So a lot of people don't realize this. You'll notice here, you can create a new budget and it'll just create a separate budget. So if you want to, you can see I have my budget, my family banking policies, that's my medium and long-term savings, my business budget. I even have a budget for my mom that I update for her to help her keep track. I'm kind of her accountant, so do that kind of thing for her. And so at minimum, you might start with that, my budget kind of thing where you're doing your medium you're doing your short term, year or less, and then add on something to help you track the medium and long term when you're ready. And you can follow the 4 rules with that medium and long term savings as well. I'm going to come back to that in another future episode. Okay, that was tip number 4. Now for the 5th one, which is a kind of controversial one. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it's not needed anymore. But a very common question I get is whether to use linked or unlinked accounts. Personally, I've tried both, but I've decided I prefer unlinked. One reason is that YNAB and my bank don't really like to talk to one another. So I was spending time waiting for the sync rather than following the 4 rules. The second reason is that I'm kind of a minimalist with my expenses, so I don't have a lot of them. Some of my accounts have 10 or less transactions per month. And it's not too difficult to sign into my bank account on one screen and YNAB on another and record the transactions super quick. Now, if you have a split screen setup, I highly recommend doing that. You could also like sign into YNAB on your laptop and into your bank accounts on your phone or your tablet, or use them in separate windows within the same screen and get the same effect. So those are my 5 top tips for beginners of YNAB. Hope you found them helpful. In the next video, I'm going to talk about my end of the month, beginning of the month process and what I do to kind of wrap up the one month and begin the next month, complete with screen share goodies and uh, things that I think about. So for now, I want you to let me know in the comments what you wish you would have known about YNAB when you first started. Let's share some tips that are not as commonly shared. Or if you haven't started yet, what's been your biggest obstacle to get going? And we can, as a community, brainstorm in the chat or in the comments a little bit how to help you overcome that obstacle. I'm also happy to help answer any beginner level questions that I can help answer or point you to the appropriate YNAB official response to that question. For now, thanks for joining me and connecting with the FIFE movement as you go about your day today. Remember, wealth is coming your way. Your quest is to prepare for using it well. For more tips on how to prepare, please be sure to subscribe, and to connect with the community, visit fifemovement.com. If my gift has helped you today, please pay the gift forward by sharing this content with a friend. My gratitude in advance. To help this video be seen by more people, please hit the like button. We invite your feedback in the comments as well.